This is eternal human spirit, where every story proves why humanity never breaks.
The mockery of tears. The great alien hall was filled with echoing laughter. Their voices rolled like thunder, mocking and cruel. High above, banners of the Empire hung, glowing with strange light. Alien leaders sat on massive stone chairs carved. With symbols of power, their eyes glowed as they looked down at the prisoner who stood in the middle of the chamber. The prisoner was human. His body was thin, his uniform torn, his face tired, but his eyes still burned with something the aliens could not understand. And on his face were tears. Shining in the light of the alien torches, the alien warriors began to laugh. One of them shouted, "Look at him, he cries like a child. Is this the strength of humanity we were told about?" Another sneered, "If this is the best your kind has to offer, then your species is already defeated." The hall shook with their laughter, and the sound was like knives cutting into the silence. But the human did not fall. He did not scream. He did not beg. He only stood there with tears rolling down his cheeks, his hands clenched into fists, his head held high. His silence made the aliens laugh even louder. From the shadows of the hall, young alien soldiers whispered among themselves. Some said humans were weak. Others said humans were strange. No warrior should cry in front of death. To them, tears were nothing but shame. Yet something about the human's tears unsettled one. Alien guard, his name was Koresh. He had fought humans on the battlefield. He had seen them bleed. He had seen them fall. But he had also seen them rise again, stronger than before. Now, as he watched the prisoner, he felt uneasy. The alien leader rose from his throne. His armor was black and silver, his voice sharp like a blade. He said, "Human, your tears are proof of weakness. You cry because you know you are beaten. You cry because you know your kind cannot stand against us. Your world will burn, your people will kneel, and your tears will be the last memory of your race." The hall erupted in cheers. The human slowly raised his head. His eyes glistened. His face was pale, but his voice when he spoke was steady. "You do not understand," he whispered. "My tears are not for me." The aliens fell silent for a moment. Their laughter died. The echo of his words hung in the air like a shadow. "What nonsense is this?" the alien leader demanded. "If not for you, then for what?" The human did not answer right away. He closed his eyes, and more tears fell. He thought of his family far away. He thought of his friends who had died fighting. He thought of the children hiding in shelters, waiting for heroes who might never return. His heart ached, but his spirit burned brighter. When he opened his eyes again, the tears were still there, but behind them was fire. "I cry for what we love. I cry for what we fight for. I cry because even in the face of death, we do not forget why we stand." His voice trembled but grew stronger with every word. "And when you laugh at our tears, you only reveal your ignorance." For a moment, the alien hall was quiet. The laughter stopped. The guards shifted uncomfortably. The leaders looked at one another. Something about the human's words pierced through their arrogance, but they would not admit it. The alien commander slammed his staff against the ground. "Enough! Take him away! He is broken already," he declared. His voice echoed in the hall, trying to drown the silence left by the human's words. But as the guards dragged the human out of the hall, Koresh kept staring. He could not forget the look in the human's eyes. He could not forget the strength hidden behind those tears. He wondered if perhaps there was something his kind had failed to see. The doors of the chamber closed with a loud crash. The laughter of the aliens began again, but it was weaker now, less certain. The human was gone, but his words lingered, his tears lingered, his defiance lingered. And though the aliens mocked him, deep inside the first crack of doubt had already begun, for the galaxy had not yet learned what human tears truly meant. The human's silence. The prison corridors of the alien warship stretched like endless tunnels carved from black stone and humming metal. Their walls glowed faintly with blue energy, symbols of power etched across them in runes that no human could read. Yet even inside this place of shadows and chains, the human prisoner walked with calm steps. His wrists were bound, his body was weary, but his spirit remained unbroken. The guards who pulled him forward were tall. Armored in plates that gleamed with cruel light, they pushed him roughly, yet no words escaped the human's lips. He remained silent, and his silence was heavier than the sound of their boots striking the floor. To the aliens, silence was a sign of defeat. They believed that a prisoner who no longer spoke had accepted his fate, but this silence was not surrender. It was the silence of thought, of memory, of inner fire. The human's mind wandered to the faces of those he had left behind. He thought of his comrades who had fallen, their last cries still echoing in his heart. He thought of his family, perhaps gone, perhaps still waiting, and of the countless innocents who had placed their trust in soldiers like him. Each memory brought pain, and with that pain, tears welled again in his eyes. The guards sneered, laughing. To each other in their harsh tongue, "Look, the creature weeps even when no one is watching." One said, "Truly, they are pathetic." Another replied, but none of them could see the truth. The human's tears were not weakness, they were reminders. Each drop carried the weight of promises made, oaths sworn, and lives defended. When the guards finally chained him inside a cell of glowing bars, the silence grew deeper. The alien jailer stood outside, curious. His name was Koresh, the same who had watched in the council hall. His eyes narrowed as he studied the human. He could not understand why this fragile creature, who should have been broken, carried such calmness even in chains. Koresh spoke, his voice low but sharp. "Why do you cry and say nothing? Why do you not scream for your life or curse your captors? Other species beg when faced with death. They howl for mercy. But you humans, you cry and then you grow quiet. It makes no sense." The human lifted his head slowly, meeting the alien's glowing eyes. His face was streaked with tears, but his gaze was unwavering. For a moment he said nothing, and Koresh felt a strange unease at that silence. Finally, the human spoke, his voice steady. "I do not cry for myself. I cry for what I have lost. I cry for those who fought beside me. I cry for those I could not save. These tears are not weakness. They are memory." Koresh frowned, his mandibles twitching as his mind tried to shape this idea. Memory? Tears are for the weak, for children, for those too fragile to endure pain. The human shook his head. "No. Tears are proof of what we endure. They are proof that we carry love, that we carry bonds, that we carry sacrifice. A warrior who feels nothing may fight, but a warrior who loves something fights harder. That is why we cry, and that is why we will never stop fighting." Koresh stepped back as if struck. He had fought many species, he had crushed many enemies, but none had ever spoken in this way. None had ever turned pain into strength. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss the human's words, but something inside him whispered that there was truth here. He remembered the battlefield, the human soldiers who kept fighting long after they should have fallen. He remembered their screams of sorrow when comrades died, followed by fury so fierce it had nearly broken his line. Perhaps these tears truly did mean something. The other guards did not notice Koresh's silence. They returned with their usual cruelty, tossing scraps of food to the human and laughing when he ignored them. They called him broken, but Koresh could see differently. The human's silence was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of someone waiting, someone holding something within that the aliens could not see. That night, when the hall outside the cells grew quiet, Koresh lingered by the bars. He found himself speaking, though he did not know why. "Your people will not survive this war, human. You fight bravely, but bravery does not defeat numbers. Empires do not fall because of tears. The human lifted his eyes again, his voice soft but cutting through the darkness. Empires fall when they underestimate what others are willing to sacrifice. You do not understand yet, but you will. Koresh felt a chill in his chest, a strange heaviness he had never known before. He turned away quickly, pretending not to care, but deep inside he could not shake the feeling that the human silence was not weakness. It was the waiting of a storm before it breaks. It was. The gathering of strength before the fire rises, and in that dark cell, the human sat alone, tears still on his face, but behind those tears burned something the aliens had never seen. A spirit that could not be chained, a defiance that even silence could not hide. The war was not yet finished. The true meaning of his tears was still to come, and when the galaxy learned it, everything would change. The alien experiments, the human's silence disturbed more than just the guard Koresh. Word of his strange behavior and his calm defiance spread throughout the alien warship. Some of the commanders grew curious. Some wanted to break him completely. Others wanted to understand what gave humans this strange resilience. Soon, a decision was made by the higher council aboard the vessel. The human would be tested. He would be studied, and the aliens would learn why his kind could still resist even when chained and humiliated. The chamber where the tests were held was vast and cold. It was filled with glowing machines, harsh lights, and cages containing creatures from other, conquered worlds. The air smelled of chemicals and burned metal. Alien scientists in long dark robes moved with precision, their hands tapping on crystal panels that glowed with alien symbols. At the center of the room stood the human, chained but unbroken, his body weak, but his gaze unyielding. His eyes followed every alien movement. His silence was heavy like a shield. The experiments began cruelly. They showed him images of his destroyed cities, recordings of human soldiers falling in battle, and even the cries of children captured from Earth. The aliens expected him to break, to scream, to curse. They watched for the moment when his spirit would collapse. But instead, the human closed his eyes, and tears rolled down his face. Not in defeat, but in memory. His tears fell silently to the floor, and when the aliens laughed, he did not react. His silence was louder than their laughter. One scientist tilted his head, whispering to his colleague, "Strange. Every other species we have tested either begs or collapses in despair. This one does neither. He cries, and then he grows quiet. Again, as if his tears give him strength." Another scoffed, "Impossible. Tears are weakness. They drain the spirit. They do not give power." But the first scientist shook his head. Then why does he still stand when his body should have broken long ago? Day after day the tests continued. The aliens starved him, weakened him, and tried to crush his mind with illusions of loss. They mocked him openly, surrounding him with laughter, calling him pathetic, but every time the human gave them the same response. He cried, "Yes." But then he lifted his head again. His silence remained. His eyes still burned with something they could not understand. Koresh often stood in the background, his arms folded, watching in silence. The words the human had spoken in the cell haunted him. Empires fall when they underestimate what others are willing to sacrifice. He could not shake the memory of those words, and now, watching the human again, he felt the weight of truth pressing against his own beliefs. The alien empire had always viewed emotions as weakness. They had trained their soldiers to kill without feeling, to conquer without pity. Yet here was a fragile human whose very emotions gave him unyielding strength. On the third cycle of experiments, the aliens decided to test him with something different. They brought another human prisoner, a young woman, into the chamber. She was chained and trembling, fear clear in her eyes. The scientists wanted to see if the man's silence would shatter when faced with the suffering of his own kind. The woman cried, calling out softly for mercy. The guards struck her, and the aliens laughed again, waiting for the man to break. But the man did not beg. He did not scream. He stared at her with tears streaming down his face, and he whispered only one thing: "Be strong." The woman looked at him, her own tears mixing with terror, and in that moment something changed in her eyes. She stopped begging. She stood, taller despite her fear, and the aliens frowned, for instead of breaking the man, they had given him another reason to remain unbroken. A scientist slammed his clawed hand on the console. "This is not weakness, this is something else. We are missing the truth." Another shook his head, refusing to believe it. "No, it must be weakness. We simply have not pushed hard enough." But even as they argued, the guards around the chamber shifted uneasily. Some had begun to feel it too. The human's tears did not weaken him. They strengthened him. They reminded him of what he fought for, and even inspired others. Koresh finally stepped forward, his voice echoing across the chamber. "Enough," he said, his eyes fixed on the prisoner. "You will not break him this way. You cannot break him because his strength does not come from himself alone. It comes from those he loves, from those he remembers. You do not understand it, but I have seen it in battle. The more you take from them, the harder they fight." His words silenced the room. The other aliens stared at him in shock. A guard speaking in defense of a prisoner was almost unthinkable. The lead scientist hissed, "You dare to speak such nonsense, Koresh? You sound as weak as the creature you admire." But Koresh did not back down. He looked again at the human, who met his gaze with calm fire. "No," Koresh said slowly, "I think we are the ones who are weak. We fight for conquest, for power, but they fight for something greater, and that is why they do not fall." The council above the chamber dismissed Koresh's words as foolishness. Yet the seed of doubt spread. The guards whispered, the scientists argued, and the leaders grew uneasy. And still the human stood, still chained, still crying, but unbroken, his tears falling like fire upon the cold ground, his silence louder than the roars of alien laughter. For though they laughed at his tears, a shadow of fear had begun to creep into their hearts. They could not explain it, they could not accept it, but they could not deny it. The human's sorrow carried strength they had never known, and deep in the silence of that chamber, the first spark of rebellion was born, not among humans, but within the hearts of their conquerors. The hidden sacrifice. The alien council grew restless after the endless trials failed to break the human prisoner. Reports spread throughout the ship that no matter what cruelty was used, no matter what loss he was forced to witness, his spirit refused to collapse. His body weakened, but his silence and his tears only grew heavier with meaning. The council demanded answers. They wanted to know why this fragile species, smaller in size, fewer in numbers, and weaker in body compared to most galactic races, still refused to surrender. They wanted to understand why humans, even in chains, carried something that felt stronger than their empire's machines, stronger than their armies, stronger even than fear itself. In the center of the Grand Council chamber, the human was once again brought forward. Chains rattled as he walked, his steps slow but steady, his face pale from hunger, his uniform torn and stained, yet his eyes still burned with the same fire. The alien leaders glared down at him from their high thrones, their voices like thunder. "You cry, you bleed, you fall, and still you rise," one declared. "Why, human, what gives you this strength?" Another leaned forward, his eyes glowing. "What is hidden behind your tears? What is it that we cannot see?" The human lifted his head, and for the first time he spoke without hesitation. His voice was quiet but carried across the chamber. "You mistake my tears for weakness. You think they belong to fear or shame or surrender. But you are wrong. My tears are not for me. They are for what I love, for what I lost, and for what I am willing to give. They are not weakness. They are sacrifice. The council erupted in laughter. Their booming voices shook the walls. Sacrifice? One alien scoffed. What value is there in giving away your life, your strength, your future? A warrior fights to survive, not to fall. Sacrifice is foolishness. Another shouted. Sacrifice is death, and death is defeat. But the human did not flinch. He stood firm, his eyes never leaving theirs. His tears glistened under the torchlight, yet behind them was steel. "No," he answered, "sacrifice is not defeat. Sacrifice is our greatest weapon. It is the proof that our lives are not just our own. It is the proof that we will give everything to protect what we love. We do not fight for conquest. We do not fight for greed. We fight for each other, and that is why we cannot be broken." The words struck like a blade. The younger alien soldiers shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another. They had never been taught such things. To them, strength was measured by dominance, power by control, and victory by fear. But here was a creature who claimed that true strength came not from selfishness but from sacrifice. Koresh stood in the shadows, his heart heavy with the weight of the human's words. He remembered the battlefield where human soldiers had thrown themselves in front of enemy fire to shield their comrades. He remembered the pilots who rammed their failing ships into alien cruisers to save their fleets. He remembered the faces of those who chose death so others might live. And now the prisoner's words gave those memories new meaning. The lead counselor slammed his clawed hand against the armrest of his throne. His voice shook with anger. "Sacrifice is nothing. It is the cry of the weak, the last gasp of the doomed. It will not save your kind." But even as he spoke, he could not rid himself of the unease spreading through the hall. The human's tears had become more powerful than their threats. His silence had become more unsettling than their laughter. And now his words began to seed doubt where once there had only been arrogance. The human closed his eyes for a moment, and more tears slipped down his face. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of countless lives. "I have seen my brothers fall so I could stand. I have seen mothers give their lives so their children could escape. I have seen soldiers charge into fire knowing they would never return, and yet we call it not weakness but honor. You mock our tears, but you do not understand that every tear is a story. Every tear is a promise. Every tear is a sacrifice that gives strength to those who remain." The hall fell into silence. The alien leaders sneered, trying to hide their unease. The soldiers lowered their eyes. Some felt anger, some felt confusion, but many felt something they had never known before. Respect. Koresh's chest tightened as he realized the truth. These humans were dangerous not because of their weapons, not because of their numbers, but because of their spirit. They carried love and sacrifice like weapons sharper than any blade. And that made them unbreakable. The lead counselor finally snarled, "Enough of this. If you cannot be broken by suffering, then you will be broken by despair. We will show you that your sacrifices mean nothing, that your tears will not save your people." He gestured to the guards. "Take him back. Tomorrow we will end this foolish game." The guards dragged the human away, but this time there was no laughter. The chamber remained quiet. The alien leaders shifted uneasily on their thrones, their arrogance shaken by the strange fire that even chains could not extinguish. As the human disappeared behind the massive iron doors, Koresh remained still. His heart battled with questions. His mind replayed the words again and again. Sacrifice is our greatest weapon. He had lived his entire life believing that conquest was strength, that dominance was power. But now he began to wonder if perhaps true power was something else entirely. That night, as silence settled over the ship, the human sat in his cell once more, his body broken, his tears flowing, but his spirit burning brighter than ever. He whispered to himself in the darkness, his words meant for no one but still echoing. "In the void, we will not fall, Not because we are stronger, not because we are greater, but because we know what we are willing to give. And somewhere deep inside the alien vessel, that whisper began to shake the foundations of an empire, the great battle. The silence within the alien warship did not last, for while the council struggled to dismiss the words of the human prisoner, the war beyond their halls grew fiercer every day. Humanity, though smaller in number and weaker in technology, refused to surrender. Entire fleets of human ships continued to rise against impossible odds. Soldiers fought even when their cities were already burning. Families shielded one another. Even in the ruins of shattered worlds, the Empire believed fear would keep them silent. Yet with every world they tried to crush, the fire of resistance only grew brighter. The day came when alarms echoed through the alien vessel. Red light spilled across the corridors, shaking the halls where the human prisoner was held. The sirens wailed with urgency, for a human fleet had dared to strike directly against one of the Empire's most powerful battle groups. To the aliens, it seemed madness. To face them in open battle was suicide. Yet when the screens lit up with the images of the fight, the counselors leaned forward in uneasy silence. For what they saw was not madness, but defiance turned into living fire. Human ships, smaller and weaker, cut through the void with furious determination. They burned against the overwhelming alien fleet. Yet even as ships were destroyed, others rushed forward to fill the gap. Entire squadrons sacrificed themselves to shield transports carrying civilians. Pilots screamed their final words into open channels. For Earth, for our families, for each other, and their voices echoed across the battlefield. The aliens laughed at first, calling the humans fools, but as the battle unfolded, their laughter died. For every time a human vessel was lost, the remaining ones fought harder, as though the tears shed for the fallen only sharpened their courage. In the council chamber, Koresh stood with other officers watching the battle unfold. His chest tightened. As he listened to the human transmissions, the voices filled with sorrow and yet overflowing with strength. "Do you see?" he whispered, though no one answered. His eyes never left the display as a human frigate, burning from bow to stern, charged directly into the path of a massive alien cruiser. The frigate's captain shouted his last words, "We give, so others may live." Before the ship exploded in a blinding burst of light, tearing the cruiser in half. The hall shook with the impact, and silence fell upon every alien who witnessed it. Meanwhile, in his cell, the human prisoner heard the distant echoes of battle rumbling through the ship. He closed his eyes, and though tears rolled down his face, he smiled faintly. He whispered to himself, "They are still fighting. They are still standing." His heart swelled with both sorrow and pride, for he knew that sacrifice was being written into the stars. The battle raged on. Alien commanders shouted orders, demanding their soldiers crush the human fleet. But confusion spread among them. Never before had they faced an enemy who fought with such desperation yet such unity. Never before had they seen warriors who turned their grief into fire. Their weapons destroyed ships, but they could not destroy the spirit that drove them. On the bridge of one alien warship, a commander slammed his fist against the console. "They should have fallen by now," he growled. "They are outnumbered, outgunned, broken." Yet his second officer hesitated before replying, his voice uncertain. "And still they fight. They do not break. They only burn brighter. Perhaps this is what the prisoner meant." The commander silenced him with a glare, but in his own heart the seed of doubt grew. As the battle reached its height, one last act of sacrifice turned the tide. A human battleship, crippled and burning, maneuvered itself directly into the heart of the alien formation. Its engines flared to life one final time, carrying it forward despite its shattered hull. The crew aboard knew they would not survive, yet not one abandoned ship. Their final transmission carried across all frequencies, for the living, for the fallen, for humanity. Then the ship detonated in a colossal explosion that tore apart half the alien fleet. The shockwave rocked the Empire's vessels, forcing them into retreat. Humanity had won not through superior strength, but through sacrifice. Back aboard the Council ship, chaos filled the chamber. The leaders shouted in anger, blaming one another. Their arrogance had blinded them. They had thought tears were weakness. Yet today, those tears had forged victory. Soldiers whispered of what they had seen, of human courage, of human defiance, and of sacrifices that had shaken even the strongest. Of alien fleets, Koresh stood in silence, his heart heavy yet alive. He remembered the prisoner's words again. Sacrifice is our greatest weapon. And now he had seen proof with his own eyes. The prisoner was brought once more before the council after the battle. His chains dragged across the floor as the guards shoved him forward. The leaders glared down, their pride wounded, their empire humiliated. One snarled, "Your people have won this battle, but they cannot win the war." The human lifted his head, his face bruised, his eyes still burning. "Perhaps not," he said, his voice steady, "but we will keep fighting, we will keep giving, we will keep sacrificing, and that is why you will never truly win." The hall fell silent once again. The alien leaders could not answer, for deep within their hearts they had seen the truth on the battlefield. Their empire was strong, their weapons unmatched, but their spirits were hollow. Humanity was fragile, but their tears and sacrifices filled them with unbreakable strength. The war was far from over, but already the balance had begun to shift, and in that moment, in the quiet chamber heavy with doubt and fear, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. For the aliens had mocked human tears, yet on this day they learned the terrible power hidden within them, the power of sacrifice that could shake even the greatest empire. The revelation, the echoes of the great battle did not fade quickly across the alien empire. Whispers spread like fire. For the first time in centuries, their fleets had been forced to retreat, not by superior weapons or cunning technology, but by a species they had considered weak, fragile, and laughable. The image of human ships burning yet still advancing, of soldiers fighting even in the face of certain death, haunted the minds of both soldiers and citizens of the Empire. Some tried to dismiss it as luck, others as foolish desperation. But those who had witnessed it firsthand knew the truth. They had seen something they could not explain, something that shattered their understanding of war. Within the council chamber, the leaders grew furious. They shouted at one another, blaming generals and commanders, demanding new strategies. Their pride was wounded, their arrogance bleeding. They could not accept that mere humans had humbled their power. But as they argued, many of the younger warriors stood in silence, their thoughts far away, remembering the sight of human sacrifice, remembering the fire in the prisoner's eyes, remembering words that had shaken them to their core. For the first time, some of them wondered if perhaps their empire's foundation was not as unshakable as they had always believed. The human prisoner was brought once more before the council, his body weakened but his spirit unbroken. Chains clinked as he stood at the center of the hall. His face was pale, his lips dry, but his eyes carried a light that seemed brighter than ever before. The lead counselor glared at him. "You think your people have won something," he spat, "but this war is far from over. Your sacrifices will drain you, your tears will drown. In the end, you will break." The human shook his head slowly, his voice calm but cutting through the chamber like a blade. "No, you do not see. Every sacrifice makes us stronger. Every tear gives us purpose. You will never understand because you do not know what it means to fight for something greater than yourself." A murmur spread among the gathered soldiers and scientists. The prisoner's words carried a weight that could not be ignored. His tears had not been hidden this time. They streamed down his face openly, yet there was no shame in them, only defiance. He spoke again, his voice growing louder. "You think we cry because we are weak, but our tears are not weakness. They our memory. They are love. They are the reminder of what we protect. They are the mark of our humanity. And they are the reason we will never kneel. Koresh, standing at the edge of the hall, felt his heart tighten with every word. He remembered his own battles, the faces of comrades who had fallen without emotion, without meaning. The Empire had taught him that victory was everything, that loss meant nothing. But now he began to see the emptiness of it. The humans mourned every loss, yet each loss gave them new strength. They carried the dead with them, not as shadows, but as fire. That was the difference. That was the secret. The council tried to silence the human. One shouted, "Enough! You are nothing but a prisoner. Your kind will be erased from the stars." But the human only raised his head higher, his voice unshaken. "Even if every world we know is burned, even if every city falls, as long as one of us still stands, we will carry the memory of all who fell. We will carry the strength of all who sacrificed. That is why you cannot win, because you fight only for yourselves. We fight for each other, and that makes us eternal." The words hung heavy in the air. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Scientists lowered their eyes. Even the leaders struggled to speak, for deep inside they knew he was right. They had seen the proof with their own eyes in the battle they had lost. They had mocked human tears, yet those tears had given birth to something stronger than fear, stronger than weapons, stronger than their empire itself. Koresh finally stepped forward, breaking the silence. His voice was low but steady. "He speaks the truth," he said. His fellow guards turned in shock, but Koresh did not stop. "We thought them weak because they wept, but we were blind. Their tears are strength. They are the proof of bonds we do not have. They are the reason. They rise again after every fall. Perhaps we are the weak ones because we have forgotten how to feel, how to fight for more than ourselves." The chamber erupted in outrage. The councillors roared in anger, but their fury could not erase the doubt that now spread among their people like wildfire. The prisoner met Koresh's gaze, and for the first time, a faint smile touched his face. He did not speak, for he did not need to. His silence carried more power than any words. The revelation had been made. The truth was out. The Empire had finally seen what human tears truly meant, and that knowledge could not be unlearned. That night, across the fleet, alien soldiers whispered in hushed tones. They spoke of the human who could not be broken, of the sacrifices that turned battles, of the tears that carried fire. Some mocked still, trying to hold on to their pride, but others felt fear, and a growing number felt something they had never known toward another species: respect. The revelation spread slowly, quietly, but it spread all the same, and as the human prisoner lay in his cell once more, weakened but unbowed, he whispered to himself, his voice soft but filled with steel, "They have begun to see. They have begun. To understand, our tears are not weakness. They are the strength that will outlast them all." And though the Empire still roared with power, though their fleets still darkened the stars, deep within their hearts, the first cracks had opened wide, the final message. The Empire stood at the edge of a shadow it had never known. For centuries, its fleets had crushed every rival. Its armies had marched across countless worlds. Its power had seemed absolute. Yet, after the battle against the humans, a new truth spread like a quiet fire. The Empire could win battles, but it could not silence the memory of what it had seen, the image of human ships burning in sacrifice, of soldiers standing unbroken even in chains, of tears that carried more strength than weapons, haunted their dreams. The laughter that once echoed through their halls grew weaker, replaced by silence filled with doubt. The human prisoner remained in his cell, weakened but not defeated. His body bore the scars of cruelty, but his spirit was untouched. Koresh visited him often now, not as a guard watching over a captive, but as a warrior drawn to something he did not understand. He asked questions, He sought answers, and slowly the human gave them. He spoke of family, of bonds stronger than fear, of comradeship that turned strangers into brothers and sisters. He spoke of sacrifice, not as loss but as victory, for every death gave meaning to the lives that remained. Koresh listened in silence, and for the first time in his long years of service, he felt shame for the emptiness of his empire's purpose. The council grew desperate. They wanted to erase the human before his influence spread further. Some demanded his execution, others his silence. But before they could act, news arrived that shook them further. Another battle had erupted at the edges of their territory, and once again humans had fought with reckless courage, throwing themselves into fire so that others could survive. The Empire won the field, but even in victory they felt no triumph. For every loss the humans suffered became fuel for greater defiance. It was as if their very tears had turned into weapons of war. Finally, the council brought the prisoner before them one last time. The chamber was silent as he stood in chains, yet every eye was fixed upon him. The lead counselor, his voice heavy with pride and hidden fear, declared, "You have brought poison into our ranks. You have spoken words that infect the minds of our soldiers. You will be silenced, and your kind will be erased from the stars." The human lifted his head, his face pale but his eyes brighter than ever. His voice was steady, calm, carrying the weight of truth. "You can kill me. You can burn our cities. You can shatter our fleets, but you will never erase us, for we live in one another, in memory, in sacrifice. Every tear we shed is not the end but the beginning, and long after your empire crumbles, humanity will remain." His words echoed across the chamber like thunder. Soldiers who stood guard felt their chests tighten. Some lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Koresh stepped forward without hesitation, his voice firm. "He speaks the truth. You mock their tears, yet you fear them. You call them weak, yet they stand against us still. Perhaps it is not they who are weak, but us, for we fight for nothing greater than ourselves, while they fight for everything they love." The chamber erupted. In outrage, counselors roared in fury, but the truth had already spread. It was no longer a secret hidden in chains. It had become a weapon sharper than any blade. The human was dragged back to his cell, but he did not resist. His work was already done. His tears had spoken louder than his chains. His silence had carried more power than their cruelty. His words had turned doubt into cracks, and those cracks would spread until the empire itself began to crumble. That night, as Koresh stood outside the cell, he whispered through the glowing bars, "Your people have already won. Even if the war continues, you have given them something we cannot destroy." The human looked at him, a faint smile on his tired face. "Not me," he whispered. "Us. Every human, every sacrifice, every tear. We are not strong because we are unbreakable. We are strong because even when broken, we rise again." The empire continued its war, but nothing was the same. Every time they faced humans, they remembered the words of the prisoner. They remembered the tears that did not break but burned. They remembered the sacrifices that shook their fleets, and slowly fear began to grow. For how could they defeat an enemy who found strength even in sorrow, who turned weakness into fire, who rose stronger with every loss? They could crush bodies, but they could not crush the spirit carried in every tear. Years later, when historians looked back upon the war, they did not speak of the great weapons of the empire, nor of its endless fleets. They spoke of the tears of humanity, of the sacrifices that turned fragile lives into legends. They spoke of the day when the galaxy finally learned that human tears were
Thank you for joining Eternal Human Spirit, where humanity always rises again.